all departments that were looked at, in particular supplies, equipment, facilities, maintenance, professional fees and services, communications, travel, and facility occupancy charges. And all of those represented overall a 9.32% increase per area, or sorry, overall amongst all of those areas. It was clear to me that that was significantly more than the one-year inflation rate of 2.2% and the average inflation rate in the country or in the province of 3.2%. Recognizing that trying to tackle all of that all at once would have been too much, but also recognizing that we have a professional staff here that we're relying on to, quite frankly, go through the areas line by line. That has not been something that we've done around this horseshoe for some time. And I hope we don't need to get back to that, but quite frankly, depending on where this budget ends up, I think we may end up getting to a world where council is going to have to take more of the budget back into their own hands to set a new and clear direction going forward. But the motion, therefore, is that the increase overall in these areas be capped at 5%. And all of that, as a result, would result in a reduction across those areas of $8,008,000. Recognizing that we had already made some reductions in that area on budget day of $1,070,000. On our last budget day, rather, the overall decrease would be capped at $6,938,000, and staff would obviously have to go back and work through the detail of that. I guess the last point I'll be making, and it just, I think is reflective of this motion and the next one. I know there's a desire to get this budget done and to move things forward, but I can tell you, personally, I am really looking to see this budget, as I said last day, to get down to somewhere between 5 and 6%. And if we can't get there, I actually think that the prudent thing to do will be to send this back to the overall budget, back to staff to do some additional work. Because quite frankly, I don't think the residents of Waterloo Region can afford what's on the table right now. And I think it's incumbent on us as the governors of the region to direct our professional staff to do further work. But there's two motions before us. We'll deal with those first, and then I guess we'll see where the discussion around this horseshoe goes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, appreciate that, Councillor Rabinovich. We do have some folks in the queue. Encourage you to jump in if you have questions. Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I don't support the motion. I won't be supporting it. I acknowledge that my friend has selected a number that is higher than the rate of inflation, but we have to remember, all of you here around here are experienced municipal councillors, and you know that the basket of goods, which reflects the rate of inflation, is not the same basket of goods that we have to deal with at the regional level. In fact, I can recall having chats with Michael Henry, who used to be the chair of finance in Waterloo. And Waterloo at one time tried coming up with a basket of goods or an inflation rate that would apply to municipal services. And that number continually came in higher than the rate of inflation because we deal with different things. So that's one thing. But I acknowledge that my friend has used a number that's higher than the rate of inflation. Our council goes through, our staff goes through a continual review annually. We see that. We see the numbers. They're always reducing and finding ways to reduce, and they show us those numbers. You've seen those numbers. You see those numbers every year. And I'm not prepared to ask staff to further reduce at this time, to take a sledgehammer to services when we could be taking a look at other things like capital, which my friend has provided a motion in that regard. So I'm fully prepared to take a look at that. But to further reduce our ability to deliver services to the people of Waterloo Region is significant. And my friend knows this because, we talk about, we might get rid of garbage cans because we don't have the people to deal with it, but we can't get rid of garbage cans, so we have to do it. And I agree with that, but we need the people to do it. And so I'm not prepared to ask staff to further reduce it this time. This is certainly something that could be brought forward, but brought forward when we're looking at all departments. All departments. My friend has listed a number of municipal departments, but we allowed the police department to go through at a rate that was over 8%. I didn't hear my friend say we have to bring that down to 5%. And we left a lot of low-hanging fruit on the table when we didn't even area or prorate hiring. Simple erasure of the word January to April would have saved millions of dollars, but none of that happened. So we're not treating all of our departments equally. And my friend also knows that our responsibilities are different at the regional level than they are at the area municipal levels. And I applaud the area municipalities for coming in at the rates that they have been coming in and doing the work that they've been doing. But that's not to say we haven't been doing a lot of work at the regional level to bring it down as low as we can. We have a lot of different responsibilities, and I'm not prepared to support this motion that's focused on certain departments. And we as a region did not act the same with all our departments. And certainly that's something we could look at in advance for next year. It is an interesting motion that my friend has brought forward, but not something I can support for this year. Thank you.
Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have a couple of questions for staff. How much, again, is, let's say, $1 million in terms of a percentage point?
It's 5.3 million.
5.3 million is 1 percentage point, okay? And to staff, I know you've already cut, I think, 1.5 million, or we've already cut 1.5 million from these departments. Is it feasible for you to cut over 6 million without drastically cutting services?
Yeah, so through the chair. We have done a significant amount of review and analysis. And if you recall this, the finance team started this process in April with forecasting and calculations. Also, just to remind you, in September, staff do a very thorough administrative review where they look at all lines that are over 5%, and $10,000 and do a thorough review of where they're at and why that's happening. And if you look at the November 27th report, we broke down what those areas, why we were seeing significant increases in some of those areas, and it's due to annualization of some of the 2024 expansions. It's some of the in-year 2024 approvals by council. And also, it's important to remember there's a significant number of those expenses that are offset by provincial funding. So there's an increase that is offset by revenue we're receiving. So you have to factor that in. Those areas would be like paramedics or senior services. There's also some adjustments there, like, for example, the communications adjustment is where we brought in cell phones for all employees. And that's supporting, it's supporting the multi-factor cybersecurity, multi-factor authentication. And we're going to see, and we have adjusted other lines in technology for as we phase out of landlines. So that's almost an offset over time. So there's several of those examples in the budget. So we've done a thorough review, and really it would require us to go back and look at service level adjustments to be able to bring a number to that magnitude.
Thank you. I guess the question I had meant to ask first was, how much money would the average taxpayer, homeowner taxpayer, pay for 1% reduction in our budget?
Go ahead, Chris. You might have that stat. The average homeowner, I guess, or based on an average house value of X.
Through you, Chair. So the current budget position, when we incorporate the police budget, showed an overall tax impact of 9.83%. On the slide that was shown, this shows an impact per every $100,000 of residential assessment of approximately $71. Based on the average household value, the annual impact of this 9.83% tax increase would be $250.
Okay.
So 1%, if you took the, I'll do the math on that, but where we're currently at 9.83 is $250.
In dollars for 1%, please.
Oh, through you, Chair. If we're talking about just the direct regional portion of taxes, as Wayne mentioned, that's 5.3 million. 1% on the overall tax bill when you incorporate police is 7.6 million.
I guess what I really want to know, sorry. The
Through you, Chair,
$25.
I can do the rough math. Yeah, $250 is for 10%. So a 1% reduction, if you want to reduce the increase by another 1%, 1% is $25 per household. That's across region and police. So it would be a little bit less, kind of 2/3, around $20 just for the region.
Okay, all right, thank you. So for $20, we're looking at a huge difference, I think, in service. And I think we also have to say, I know people have said, well, the homeowner, taxpayers, the property tax, can't afford this. Well, the people who are paying property tax have property. The people whose services we're cutting generally don't have property. So we're hurting our most vulnerable people. If I can't pay another $20 on my house taxes, and that causes me to sell my house, it wasn't that $20. It was I lost my job, the cost of living, etc. And when I sell my house, even at a reduced rate, I'll have thousands of dollars. I won't be on the street.
Okay.
I'm just saying, all right.
Yeah,
this is my time to speak.
You are.
All right?
Yep.
And, I think we have to put things in perspective. So when we cut a service for someone who's renting or doesn't own property, if they can't afford it or can't, they are going to possibly the street. They don't have the equity in their property. So I'm not saying that people that all of us in this economy are hurting. We all are. But this is not the time to cut services. And a lot of the services that we're looking at here have to do with some of our housing stock, our affordable housing stock that needs, to be maintained, needs to be built, needs to be, continued. So, yes, we can ask staff to look at cutting some more, but I think asking them to cut originally 8 million, they've already cut 1 million or more, down to 6 million, basically for $20 difference, I don't think is supportable. So I will not be supporting this motion, and I urge you not to.
Okay, Councillor Shantz, I do see on the speakers list, so I've got Councillor James, Chair Redmond, Councillor Shantz, Councillor Salonen, Councillor Foxon, and newly added Councillor Craig. So Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair Harris. I just want to quantify, or ask staff a question, just to quantify this in terms of what the risk would be in terms of service delivery. Like, how would this impact the service delivery within this specific department and risks potentially associated with that? Stepping aside from the tax levy implication now, thinking about the services.
Who wants to take that? Matthew.
Okay, through the chair. So the implications, and I think the report that had been brought forward on November 27th really goes through the different categories. So there are things, and looking, following the motion, and I think staff looked back at all of these numbers to get a better understanding of that. if we look at the big numbers, so facilities maintenance, for example, is one of the big increases. It's 30% and about 3 million. We have to know that more than 60%, and maybe Commissioner Rose can help me on this, of the work orders are related to Waterloo Region housing. So that means if we cut that, that means that there will be more significant delays to repair Waterloo Region housing, windows, plumbing, et cetera. So the team will prioritize and go to whatever is most urgent, but things like window replacement when they're leaky, that will not happen. So that's one example in facilities. Commissioner Steffler shared on the communication side, the main increase there is due to the phones for everyone, and that's a cybersecurity measure. Again, it's to be able to have for all of the frontline folks to be able to access through their phone with multi-factor authorization, so they have the identification going through. So the impact of that would be both kind of greater increases in the future from communications, because we would have to keep some of the landlines, but the main one is actually more vulnerability to cybersecurity attacks, because we wouldn't be fully protected as an organization. So they're all very different. I know there were some numbers that we looked at. There's some increases in supplies. There's a big number, 22% on the user rates. So that's due to the increase in the cost of chemicals for water treatment mostly. So that's something that we cannot reduce. The impact would be significant on hundreds of thousands, so that cannot be modified. So I'd say every cost category has a bit of a different kind of impact, but there I hope I've highlighted some of the main ones, and maybe Commissioner Steffler can add anything.
Yeah, just as another example, like the facility occupancy charges, that $3 million increase, that's an internal transfer. So that's charging facility costs to various units and the recovery coming back into the facilities area. And we do that because it's important for some of our externally funded programs that we recognize all our costs. So we obviously, if we reduce that, we're reducing the revenue, so that wouldn't create any impact. So that would have to come from other areas.
Okay, just one follow-up for Councillor Urbanovic. When you were going through, was there a reason why you just picked this department, or were there others that you were looking through as well? Just wanted to understand, kind of speaking to some of what Councillor Deutschmann was saying, why this one?
So happy to answer that question. Thank you, Councillor James. But to be clear, this is not about one department. This is about all departments. So just to give you an example, again, on communications, for example, community services went up 15.7%. Transportation services went up 39.1%. Engineering and environmental services went up 23%. Planning went up 10.1%. Public health and paramedic services went up 77.3%. Elected offices went up 7%. CAO dropped down 14%. Corporate services dropped down 9.1%. And human resources and citizen services went up 36.5% for an overall average increase of communications across all departments of 16.9%. That's at a time when inflation, no matter how you cut it, even if you look at municipal inflation rates that have been talked about, have not been 9%, have not been 17%, have not been 77%. And so the reality is there's some heavy lifting here that, quite frankly, should have been done administratively, and in my view, not enough of that was done. And that's partially why I think at the end of this day, we need to send this back for some more work.
Okay, I know that Commissioner Steffler has a response to that question, so we'll go to him and then we'll carry on through our list.
So through the chair, so just on communications, we listed an explanation there, but I'll just go through it again. So a big part of that increase was the MyoVision contract and transportation. The increase was almost double the cost, so $460,000. And the other part of that was what I mentioned earlier, was us moving to staff having cell phones versus landlines to support cybersecurity through multi-factor authentication. And it's almost net neutral when you start to look at some of the other lines in the IT budget for landline costs. And so when you factor that in, that's what's making up that increase.
Okay, Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I too will not support this motion, and I guess I would just like to remind all of us that there have been many hours of meetings where we actually were going line by line. And we looked at service reductions, and we heard from our community that that was hurting the most vulnerable in our community. We are one of the fastest growing central metropolitan census areas in Canada. So we do have to make investments in cybersecurity. We do have to look at how we provide essential services for those people who depend on them to conduct their lives. So this has been very close to line by line on many occasions. There has been, I think, excellent information given by staff. We have on 2 occasions asked staff to go back and rethink what the reductions would look like and where we could bring the levy down. So I would tell you, I have, in the little time that I've been in public office, never seen a perfect budget process. I'm not going to pretend this one was not without areas that could be improved, but I think that this council has been engaged in some very challenging decisions. We put some tough possibilities out there to the community. We heard back from them, and while this is a tough budget year and people are suffering financially, I think it has received the scrutiny that it deserves, and I will, because of that, not support this, nor would I support deferring it. We've had many opportunities. I'm probably going to channel Councillor Salonen now when I say there were times when we finished early and we could have kept going on, but there was a lot of information to process. I think we've arrived at a fair result that I'm happy to take to the community.
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. And thanks to Councillor Verbanovic for bringing this forward. I understand the intent of what he's trying to do, and I agree with the intent. He hasn't asked for any service reductions in the proposal. It's going across all departments, and it's looking at 7 different lines of expenses. And I think some of the answers we've received today just reflects the work that staff should be doing in terms of working together across departments. And I've asked that question before, and I'm still not 100% sure I got an answer on that. But this is saying you've got 7 different areas that affect each department, and we're asking you to reduce it by, is it 4%, I think, in total. So I'm going to support the motion. I know that there's been a lot of work done, and I acknowledge that, and this has been a very difficult process, and I would dearly love to finish it today too, but I'm going to support Councillor Verbanovic on this because I think he makes a really good point about looking at expenses across departments and not just categorizing them within a department. I also have some questions that I'll bring up at some time, maybe not today, but about staffing across departments and overall staffing increases versus the cost of payroll that I'd like to have looked at some point. And this probably isn't quite the right time, but thank you.
Councillor Foxen.
Thank you. Just to respond to Councillor Wolf's comment, I was in the bank yesterday where a couple were pleading with the bank because they were going to lose their home and they were going to be homeless. People aren't walking away from homes with money in their pocket. They're walking away with mortgages. An elderly couple that sold their house walked away with a $300,000 mortgage still remaining. So people are we're increasing homelessness. People are at the breaking point. If we don't realize this, we're in trouble. So I'm not saying yay or nay about either of the motions. I'm listening to everyone. Councillor Shantz makes a really good point, especially in the increase in staffing and that's happened over the last few years, which I think has been a concern for many of us. But to say that people having a home are going to walk away with money in their pocket in this society is not realistic. Thank you.
Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I certainly appreciate Councillor Ivanovich's initiative. I think the comprehensibility of everything he's looked at. And I think the fact that he would like us to move forward with a further reduction. You know, if you look at all the councillors' reductions, it's 0.3%. And the majority of the reductions have been recommended by staff. And all Councillor Ivanovich is doing is saying we should be more involved in what's going on and have a further look at this. With regards to homeowners and the most vulnerable, we tend to throw the words around most vulnerable all the time when it sort of suits our purpose and where we're going. And I'd like to point out that homeowners are vulnerable too in many situations, not just in terms of budgets or taxes, but also community safety, which is something that has not been really addressed properly. With regards to the police budget and my new friend across the way, I just want to point out it's the police budget that is helping to bring it all down, okay, with regards to its 8.4%. And I think that obviously staff have done a good job. We're just asking them to go back and do a bit better job. That's all this is. This isn't dramatic, it's 1%. And it can easily be done, and there'll be difficulties, but we will get through the year and we'll come back to another budget year and things will still be standing. So I'll be supporting the motion. I think it's good to have an initiative from a councillor who's done a lot of work on this to try and bring us to a better level in terms of the impacts on our community. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Verbanovich.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to all my colleagues for their comments. There's no question that budgeting is a difficult process, and there are, obviously always challenges when we're needing to deal with these things. I know my good friend on the opposite side of the horseshoe has said, let's remember that our basket of goods is different than the average citizen, and yes, that is true, and that's why this motion speaks to a 5% number, which is even higher than MPI. No matter who calculates it. I'd also like to remind that, and the reference has been made that, the region is different than area municipalities. 100% true. But I'd also like to remind, we do have some comparators. Peel region, property tax increase, 5.5%. Durham region, property tax increase, 4.9%. York region, I couldn't get a property tax increase, but a tax levy increase, 3.5% plus 1% for infrastructure and in-transit special fund. So now we are talking comparators. And yes, one region is a little different than another and so on. But I would suggest that all of those numbers are vastly different than the 9.83% that we're looking at here today. I recognize staff's role is to give us the best possible advice. Nobody said, let's stop buying the chemicals for treating our water. And, there are large numbers in each of these areas that we're talking about when we're talking about travel, communications, and so on. I can go and remind everyone of them again, but I don't think that's necessary. And lastly, folks, I think we need to remember that the decisions we make are going to impact people. And it's not just going to mean, maybe I have one less coffee or something. It's going to mean that more people are potentially going to lose their home, putting pressure on our rental market, potentially putting pressure on our homelessness costs that are then just going to go up. And I'm sorry that I have to say this to my colleague, but if we're starting to talk about saying, well, if people need to sell their house because of an increase, and they'll be able to put more money, they'll be able to put the profits in their pocket. Really? Is that where we've come to when we're talking about tax increases? Because if that's where we've come to, then I would say that, quite frankly, we really need to question our motivations as a collective around this. So I would urge my colleagues, as difficult as this is, as difficult as the work will be that staff needs to do to support this, and recognize that we need to get this budget down. Or quite frankly, I believe collectively, the regional municipality of Waterloo will have failed the residents of Waterloo Region.
Okay, we've got a couple speakers that haven't spoke, and then we'll go back to those that are on the list for a second time. Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want clarification on what, if we are on, I apologize for joining the meeting late. Are we talking about 4.1 as it's printed, or is there some suggestion that it be sent back to staff? I just want to be clear before I ask any questions or make any comments exactly what this conversation is about.
Yeah, no, we're only on item 4.1. There was some casual comments about the other, but we're only discussing the motion as before you, item 4.1.
And not being sent back or deferring anything on this, voting on it.
No, there's no indication of that in this.
Okay, that's my question for now. Thank you. I just want to be clear on so I can follow the conversation properly.
Sure. Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually getting tired of the term vulnerable, as Councillor Craig and Councillor Foxton have alluded to, because I think that is a very fluid term. Vulnerable, there's a lot of new vulnerable people who are in our communities. And I told you last time that I have 6,400 unpaid tax accounts right now, and that's without this full year that we're going into. So when we talk about the people who are homeowners currently, even if they wanted to sell their house, there's no place for them to go. They've got a low mortgage rate now. Mortgage rates are much higher than a lot of them paid initially. They can't afford the payments. They can't downsize because there's no places for them to go. There's no apartments for them to rent. Where do you think these people are going to go that are going to be homeless in the next year if we don't do something? I sat last week with low-income housing provider who is at risk of losing a piece of property from unpaid taxes. And this is a well-known low-income housing provider. There's nothing legislative. We can't wipe that off the books. We can't do that legislatively. But this is one of the ones that you would not consider vulnerable under the term that's being tossed out here. So I think we need to stop using that word, because every single person in society today is vulnerable to what we do around this horseshoe. I will be supporting the motion.
Councillor Nowak.
Yes, thank you. And I'll thank Councillor Verbanovic for bringing this forward. I'm going to be supporting it for sure. I just wanted to point out very quickly that the $250 annually increase is just the regional portion. The lower tiers still have to do their budgets, and I think that $250 could easily escalate to anywhere from $300 to $400 going forward. So I think anything that we can do to bring the initial one down, I think it's worthwhile. So I definitely will be supporting this. Thank you.
Yep, we've got a second round. Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Chair Harris. First off, I just want to say that it's disappointing how Councillor Wolf's comments are being distorted here. I mean, there's no greater advocate for those that are the most vulnerable in our community, who has advocated strongly around this horseshoe, and her heart is in the right place and her intentions are in the right place. So I don't like to see people turning a comment around for the purposes of their own argument, and that's unfortunate. Also, too, we have to remember, as per the Code of Conduct, everyone has their opportunity to speak without being interrupted. Now, Matthew was asked the question, CAO Gutska was asked the question, and indicated that what impact these cuts could have. And one of them was specifically that it could have an impact on repairs to our housing. Has anyone been to our housing? Has anyone visited our housing to see what condition it is in? I don't think too many have. Or else you would be opposed to any sort of cut to fixing the supply that we have in our community currently. And so to say that this is not impacting services is not correct. It is impacting services. It's impacting our most vulnerable in our community. And I'll use that term because we all understand what we mean when we use that term. I'll not have it distorted and made it to suddenly be a term that shouldn't be used. We understand that we are here to do our best with respect to property taxes. To suggest that staff has not been doing heavy lifting, I mean, all you gotta do is just close your eyes and think about the past 5 months. Our staff has been doing heavy lifting here. That is a complete distortion of the work that has been done around this horseshoe, the inner horseshoe, and throughout our organization. And don't forget, we've been through, not only did we deal with publicly here the service cuts that came to the table, we were enclosed with an even longer list of proposed service cuts by staff. So they have been looking at all aspects and all elements of our organization. And we've been through all that. My new friend, and I was going to say, I was going to direct it to one, but suddenly I had two new friends from across the horseshoe. My new friend wouldn't change the word January to April in the police budget to save $2 million. So we can argue back and forth if you want about the police budget today, and I'd be happy to do that, but I don't want to. But I'm just saying that is what the issue was with respect to that. And my other new friend comments on the increases this year. I don't know what the historical increases have been over the past 3, 4, 5 years. And perhaps you have that information and you can share that with us, and I'd be happy to hear that. But if you're just talking about this current year, I can't use that as a comparator, all right? We deal with water, we deal with waste, we deal with transit, we deal with a lot of heavy services at this level. And I don't think the area municipalities want those services, and we're happy to work together to get those done at this level. And sometimes our costs are a little higher than the area municipality costs, okay? So I'm not going to support the motion. If my friend wants to bring that motion forward next year as part of an overall review, fair enough. But our staff has been doing the work, and I'm confident in the work that they've been doing to this point and will not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Commissioner Rose wants to chime in on that recent comment question.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I wanted to talk about one of the items, which was facilities maintenance, because that is a division that's in my department. When I saw the increase that was proposed for all of the different departments and divisions, I did ask my staff for a detailed explanation as to why the costs had gone up in different departments and divisions. Excuse me.
Okay. Yeah. So
to that, not to the fact that what's being said, but the fact that this is a political discussion, okay? And we cannot entangle ourselves with staff getting into it. That's all I'm raising.
Yeah, I will say if there's questions directed, we'll want responses and answers. So, you know, if there's anything you want to wrap up on that, we'll move on to the next speaker, which is Councillor Salonen. So, Commissioner Rose, was there anything you want to add? Or?
Yes, and I apologize for that.
No need to apologize.
Yep.
Just a point of order.
Okay.
So I just wanted to talk about the increases to facilities maintenance. At the end of 2023, we had a total of just over 7 million square feet of facilities to maintain, and over 50% of that are Waterloo Region housing. I believe it's 60% or 62%. In 2024, we added 105,000 square feet with 60 new buildings, and we're expected to add another 160,000 square feet with the opening of Kings Court and Wilson housing in 2025. Facilities and Fleet Maintenance performs over 40,000 work orders a year, both planned and unplanned. Over 16,000 come from housing, 5,000 from Sunnyside, and 3,000 from transit. The top 5 problem areas are plumbing, HVAC, building repair, fire and life safety, and doors. Currently, in the 2024 budget, we're projecting to be over a budget by $3.5 million in facilities maintenance due to all of these buildings coming online. This number will show up across all programs and will reduce any surplus from the bottom line at the end of the year. If we remove any other work from the facilities maintenance budget, we will be impacting those in our community who live in Waterloo Region housing, shelters, encampments, and Sunnyside, as work in these areas would only be, we'd only be able to respond to costly emergencies, as preventive maintenance could not be done, causing our assets to fail and go into further bad condition. So I just wanted to add that as one of the risks to for council to consider. We did, as you may recall, had an option to remove $1,070,000 in the budget, which was adopted by council in the last committee meeting. And that even then, we thought that that was a risk, but we wanted to put it forward for an option for council's consideration.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Salonen.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm a bit surprised that the conversation is getting a bit adversarial around the table and really whipping around that this is going to impact our residents. Every decision that we make around this table is going to impact residents and have varying impacts based on individuals' lifestyles and what their realities are. One thing that I think is good about having multiple elected officials is that there are different perspectives. So there are some of us who really want to ensure that not a single service that we provide, whether it's legislative or not, is stopped. And there are others who, like myself, are looking that although it's nothing against them being good services, in some cases, yes, necessary services that we do provide, that are ones that we need to scrutinize. And I'm pleased that Mayor Burvanovic brought forward this motion. We do need to, in my opinion, around this horseshoe, take the information that staff have brought forward, and I think that they've done a very good job of that, but it is also our job to then scrutinize and decide what level of service we do as legislated by the Municipal Act. So I would just say not making it personal around the horseshoe and instead just making it about if you feel that that's the way to vote on a motion, then vote that way. And frankly, I think we could really stop a lot of this going around the horseshoe multiple times over and just make decisions for the residents that we represent.
Okay, we've given folks plenty of opportunity to comment on this. I've got 3 speakers left for the second time. So Chair Redmond.
Chair Harris, I'm going to move that we call a question.
Okay, Councillor Salonen seconded that.
Sorry.
Okay, so we go right to a vote on calling the question.
I wanted to make an amendment.
Councillor Shantz, you want to vote, please, on that one? So that was carried, but I'm going to take 5 minutes, and we've got maybe Councillor Benedict pop up, and we're just going to review the wording of it as it relates to potential net levy impact and that ability to calculate that effectively for today, if you want to pop up.
Chair, just FYI,
Okay, we're going to resume. The question was called, and so now we'll put the Councillor Verbanovic motion, seconded by Councillor Salonen, up on 4.1.
I'm surprised he didn't jump.
Foxen, James, and Shantz, please. All right, that carries, colleagues. 4.2, we have a Councillor Verbanovic second motion. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Craig. Councillor Verbanovic.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And in this particular instance, I'm looking to reduce capital budgets to have a reduction of 1%, which would be $5.3 million based on the number given to us by staff earlier in the 2025 regional tax levy. Obviously, we're not in a position to go through the what that impact will be project by project over the 10-year capital budget. But what we can do today is make that reduction and direct staff to come back to us with the proposed changes to the capital projects in 2025 and beyond. That would be in a $6.7 billion budget, capital budget, and a almost $653 million capital budget in 2025. It would be looking to make a $5.3 million reduction with staff coming back to indicate how they would implement that subsequent to today. But we could pass the budget with that.
Chair Redmond.
Can I just ask staff what, if any, impact this would have on the 2026 budget?
So through the chair, it's, I guess, dependent on how we would approach the reductions. It seems like from the motion that it is to reduce the capital expenditures in the capital budget, not the flow of investment income that we discussed at a previous meeting and talked about the risks of that. So for us to, because that's the only way we could impact the levy, would be to then reduce the corresponding money that flows from the operating to the capital and offset by expenditures. So we went through a process through this budget a few times, reviewing how we could move and defer projects. And so we already, I think it's been reported, we have a significant deferred maintenance backlog. So that will increase that deferred maintenance backlog. Those type of things usually result in increasing costs. There would be an increased reliance on debt for maintenance, so moving away from that pay-as-you-go concept. And we'd run the risk of compliance risks and not being aligned with some of our strategic priorities through just a significant across-the-board reduction.
And can you just remind all of us how much the capital budget has been reduced already through this budget process?
Most recently, we reduced the capital budget for 2025 by $2.5 million impact in the current that did impact the current levy through a few projects. We went through and deferred further other projects over the life of the 10-year forecast. And And also just the reminder that we are on the cusp of doing a significant asset management review. So that will occur where we do talk about level of service as well. So what level of service we're looking to achieve from our assets, that will occur in February, March, with a final report around our asset management strategy mid-June or June 30th. And along with that, we would discuss reserves and reserves levels that would fund that. And as you know, our reserves are quite low relative to our comparators.
Could I just ask Commissioner Rose, who also, it impacts a lot of water and wastewater. I know we have many discussions about that. What's the risk of this further reduction?
I can give you, the risk is what Commissioner Steffler has indicated, and also, you know, especially with water and wastewater, there is a risk that our assets will fail more often because we have aging infrastructure that we can't address, and it will also impact growth because we will not be able to move forward with some of our growth projects that are also funded by rates, because we do have growth projects that are funded by both rates and by DCs. But just to go back to your previous question, Chair Redmond, in the 2025 draft budget with our first go-around, we've already deferred $41.5 million in transportation, $21 million in housing services, $4.1 million in the airport, and $16.2 million in transit, $10 million in water, and $10.6 million in wastewater. So that was the first go-around that we did as staff. And then, as Commissioner Steffler said, we then went back as council asked us to, and went back and deferred some more projects.
So this could impact our ability to keep up with the growth that we all want to see happen in housing.
Yes. Yep.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I was going to ask the question that I think Commissioner Rose just anticipated was how much, just to remind us of how much we've already deferred through this process. And so partly what my question is, like, we've already given direction to staff. I think that was last week around my question, which was around potentially debenturing, looking at a report, and staff were going to do an analysis around changes to how we debenture capital projects to see if that were a way to reduce some of our costs and and extend them from 20 to 30-year debentures. So personally, I think it's important to wait to hear that analysis, because if I recall, Commissioner Steffler, you said that would come back for a discussion in January. Is that correct? Yep. So I'd like to hear what that could look like for us. And then as well, I'd like to hear what the asset management review would look like for us before we take sort of an across-the-board additional reduction in addition to the, I didn't do the math, but it sounds like it's somewhere in the neighborhood, Commissioner Rose, of about 100 million that we've cut out. Like you were saying, 21 million, 41 million. I missed a couple other numbers, but call it, I don't know, 80 to 100 million. I wasn't doing the math. But so because of that, I think there's two other big pieces that we should be considering before we go ahead with something like this. So I'd like to, I'm going to move to defer this motion to February, or at least until after we've had this asset management review and the review of the debenture, the analysis of the debenture and payment processes.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that deferral? Councillor Deutschman, discussion on the deferral. Councillor Benedict.
Yeah, on timing, I guess I would ask my friend on the opposite side of the horseshoe, is her motion also looking at deferring today's budget decision? Because by deferring the issue, we are not able to impact the 2025 proposed budget. And so unless it's looking at also deferring the budget until those reports come back, I wouldn't be in a position to be able to support this deferral.
Councillor McCabe.
So that's a good question. I don't know if it's possible to pass the operating portion of the budget and not the capital piece, or no? I mean, I'm not really particularly interested in deferring the entire budget.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor McCabe, do you want to run that by us one more time?
I was just wondering, I mean, if it's possible, like, I'm not interested in deferring the entire budget, but is it possible to defer the capital piece and go ahead with the operating piece? Like, is it possible to just, I'm only just interested in deferring Barry's motion, sorry, Councillor Verbanovic's motion.
So through the chair, so if we would kind of hold and not go forward with the capital budget, that would impact a significant amount of projects that we're working on, and impacts to contracts, service levels, many things. I think Councillor Rose or Commissioner Rose wants to speak as well.
Yes, just to add to what Commissioner Steffler is saying, the reason we like the capital budget to be approved before the end of the year is we tender in January when we can get the best prices from our contractors. So any delay in the capital budget could affect tender prices for our contracts going forward. I've seen some contracts go out as late as April, and actually, you may recall this, the Myers Road construction that we had done, we actually had no bidders because it went out so late that they weren't looking for work anymore. So we had to rebid that project when people were looking like for bids and tenders. So that's one of the impacts.
Okay, thank you very much for that additional information. So then I'll move to defer this to the 2026 budget.
Okay, so we had a, so this is, just a second.
Yeah, is that?
Just go back to the seconder. Okay, so we got a new deferral motion before us to defer.
And again, I just think we
we
need to
budget.
have the information about
Okay.
the asset management review that's coming in a couple of months. I think that's really important information for us to consider. And then as well, I'd really like to have the analysis, and I think it's important for us to all have the analysis on the question that I asked a few weeks ago around about changing the way we debenture and what, because that could have that would have a potentially very significant impact on the property tax levy. So I think it's more important to have that information before we just make an across-the-board cut. Also considering that I don't know if Commissioner Rose has added up all the numbers that she just listed off, but we've already deferred a significant amount of projects. Thank you.
Okay, so any further discussion on the deferral? Councillor Deutschman?
Yes, thank you, Chair Harris. Yeah, I support the deferral because, you know, we're talking about something pretty significant and serious here when we're talking about capital projects. I mean, you can't just make that decision in a bubble. You need more information. You need to consider the context. We see what's happening in our region with respect to issues about capital projects and deferrals over a period of time and what that's doing to current budgets. It's a significant issue and not one that can be lightly 1% over 10 years without considering the other implications and the other issues that have been brought forward. I think it's correct for us to defer this to the 2026 budget for more time to receive analysis and information back from staff so that we can consider that properly. As the board of directors of the region, I, for one, need way more information than what's being provided here to suddenly make a reduction in capital, knowing that there could be implications there and wanting to know what the other implications are, as we've seen happening in our community already, which has resulted in some significant issues that are being dealt with. So this is a very serious consideration, and it requires us to have more information and not one that we should be doing on Friday, December 20th in the morning without more information other than the motion itself. Thank you.
Councillor Solomon?
I mean, I was in the queue to speak to the motion, but I also thought that a deferral, we could only talk about time and place.
The seconder of the deferral spoke right after that, so I'm asking if there's any other further discussion on the deferral. So No other discussion on those items? Okay, so then we'll go to a vote on the deferral.
Chair, point of order.
Okay.
I don't want to be taken that I wasn't talking about time and place with respect to the deferral. I mean, if we're talking about time and place, it's not just a matter of saying this time and this place. This is a discussion. This is a point of order. This is a proper point of order. This is a discussion about time and place. So the question is, what can you talk about when you're talking about time and place? So my arguments were why I was suggesting the time and place was appropriate. That's what my discussion was about, and it's appropriate point of order discussion. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go to vote now on the deferral, moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Deutschmann. Okay, and that motion carried. Colleagues, we've got withdrawal of motion 4-3. I'll now pass it back to Commissioner Steffler to speak to the 2025 user fee and charges update. Wayne. Point of order, Councillor Verbenovic.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering at what point, well, a couple of things. At what point will you be entertaining additional motions, potentially from the floor, from members of council? That's number one. And number two, I will note that there was also a request to have an in-camera session today. That request was made of, was forwarded to the clerk and to the chair and members of council to deal with issues that could impact the 2025 budget and would also, involve identifiable individuals. I will note that while that could impact this budget in a way to further make some reductions, the chair obviously has not put that on the agenda. I'm not going to pursue that today, but I will just voice my disappointment that we're not having the opportunity to have that conversation. Thank you.
Okay, so there's no motion to go into close then?
Well, it wasn't on the, there was no closed meeting that was called for, and I'm not, the request was made, and I'm not going to push that issue at this point in time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so if there is or are additional councillor, initiated motions for the budget, we need to obviously waive that notice, and we can, there's a process to do that. We can do that now if you want. If there are any of our colleagues that have those motions, we'll follow that same procedure that we did last time, and this would be probably the appropriate spot to do that if there are. So.
Well, you're looking at me. I mean, as I said, I did make the request. I'm respecting the fact that the chair did not call a special council meeting and will not be pursuing that, but I am disappointed that one wasn't called. I will also note, Mr. Chair, that I do think that, I think this next piece will probably wait until Mr. Steffler, until the municipal budget overall motion comes to the table, because at that point I think would be where we could consider a deferral of sending it back to staff for additional work if that's the will of this council.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Just in response to the request for a closed, it would be protocol and procedure that there would be a motion put forward. There was no motion provided. So because of that, nearly the fact that they're identifiable people, I would suggest to you that I don't know that that would have been fair to the rest of council. So had a motion come forward, it certainly would have been considered with in concert with the clerk if it was appropriate to be enclosed. But because there was no specific specific motion, it was not put on the agenda. And again, I would remind council, we have been dealing with this since August. All of this is difficult, challenging decisions to make. And today is actually, I think, cleaning up some of the leftover items that were not covered off in our last budget meeting. So because of that, and there was no motion, I did not schedule an in-camera.
Yes, okay. Councillor McCabe?
Thanks, through you, Chair. I guess I'm wondering, so we have, we just passed a motion, or a motion was just passed to reduce the budget by an additional 5%. So I'm wondering where that puts the tax levy right now. And I'm also just wondering, I guess, like, based on what was just said, if there's additional motions coming, I guess I'm just wondering at what point we're actually going to settle this budget.
Well, I think that...
Because it's like, if there's additional motions coming, how are we to know if we pass the budget motion?
So I think let's stick with our agenda. We're going to go to user fees in number 5, and then we're going to come back to, then we've got the regulation on 6, and then the main budget motion on 7. I think that's where we can have this discussion. Obviously, finance needs to confer with one another to be able to provide information for number 7. So I'm going to go to Wayne for user fees, let him deal with that, and then there'll be an opportunity.
When are we actually done with motions, I guess?
We're done with motions as of now until we get to number 7, which is the final budget motion. Okay, I'll let you carry on, Commissioner Steffler.
So through the chair, so we're looking at the 2025 user fees and charges report. And so the Municipal Act authorizes us to establish and maintain a list of services subject to fees and charges. And as part of that 2025 development process, all the service areas have been reviewed for the user fees and charges have been reviewed. It's important to note that approval of this is important at this stage because this impacts those rates that start at the beginning of the year. So they will then be able to be implemented throughout the year as well. In terms of some of the highlights, the wastewater budget included rates for wholesale water and wastewater rates, water supply at 4.9%, wastewater treatment at 5.9%. The retail rates for Wellesley North Dumfries, water distribution was 3.9%, wastewater collection was 3.9%. For 2025 transit services, the budget includes an average fare increase of 2.7% with detailed increases and effective dates varying by fare type. Waste management fees are proposed to increase April 1, and this includes tipping fees, general refuge and special handling and load rate adjustments. The airport proposed fees include increases for automobile parking, landing fees, apron parking, and snow removal. And there's been minor changes to fees and charges proposed for senior services, legal fees, supportive housing, cultural services, regional growth, development, sustainability, public health programs, paramedic services, and transportation. And Appendix A lists all of those fees that are being introduced and changed for 2025.
Okay, question on user fees? Councillor Salonen.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Looking on page 4 of 7, I was just curious with the recyclables tipping fee, where does that money go now that we don't actually process the recycle, like the blue bin part? I'm just curious to understand that and how those revenues flow.
Oh, through the chair to Councillor Salonen, you had me reach deep into my memory there. So part of the recycling program with the producers is they rent space, or we're working with them to rent space if we haven't just done it already for the tipping fees with the you know, in the bins. When you go into the public drop-off, there's the bins where you can throw your recycling into, and we can sell that back to, they collect that revenue as well, and, they collect that material and then they sell it back to their, to the people who purchase that kind of revenue material. So we're actually, the revenue that you see is the revenue from recycling now that the region gets is from renting space to the producers.
If I could just clarify, so that tipping fee then doesn't go into any of our revenue sources, that instead goes to the new recycling operator?
I would just have to clarify that, Councillor Salonen, because it's quite complicated. Because if recycling comes from businesses, then that's not part of producer responsibility. Oh, here we go. One moment.
Not a problem.
So the blue box fees at the public drop-off are, just as I was saying, they cover the non-eligible materials, which are not covered in the blue box regulation, which are those from industries and commercial institutional organizations.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Foxon.
Thank you, Chair. And just for common knowledge, we got the point of order forms, information forms from the clerks. And a point of order is a procedural rule that isn't being followed. Procedural. The point of order is not an opportunity to interrupt a speaker, debate, to provide information, object to a statement, or ask a question. Point of order, a council can raise their hand, be recognized by the chair will recognize the person, then the person has to say how the procedural bylaw is not being followed. Procedural bylaw only. And then the chair will rule whether it is a point of order or not. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, yeah. Point of clarification or point of order, I give it some gray there, but I will ask actually now for a mover and a seconder on the user fees and charges. Do I have a... Okay, moved by Councillor James, seconded by Councillor Salonen. If there's no further discussion, we'll go to a vote again on 2025 user fees. Okay, and that carries. Councillor James? Oh, sorry. Okay, so 6, the municipal budget regulation, I'll pass it back over to Commissioner Steffler to speak to that report.
Okay, municipal budget regulation report. So under this, the Municipal Act requires municipalities to prepare and adopt a budget. Accompanying regulations allow for amortization expenses, post-employee benefits, solid waste landfill closure, and post-closure expenses to be excluded from the budget. So that's where, when we review, this comes up when we review the financial statements and we discuss how we do a modified cash basis in terms of our budgeting. This is what this is referencing. So this report fulfills that requirement. And the region includes it in the annual budget contributions to capital reserves to provide funding for asset renewal and replacement costs. And the region also includes it in its annual budget and the cost of employee benefit expenses. So we're including the actual costs where when we do the financial statements, it's that long-term accrual that we have to account for. So that's what this report is referring to.
Okay, Councillor Benefit, question?
Yeah, so I guess I'm just trying to understand the order between numbers 6 and 7. And are the numbers in here, in effect, assuming that 6 passes in its current form? Because if there are further changes that occur, depending on what we do with number 7, won't that change some of these numbers potentially? Well, transfers to, having heard the question from Chair Redmond across the horseshoe, which is how would they change? If there's 191,377,000 being contemplated in terms of transfers to capital reserves, for example, if we don't ratify number 7 in its present format or we defer it, that number can still change. Those transfers may change based on what the needs are. Mr. Steffler or someone from staff, can you enlighten us, please? Because it's $248 million we're talking about here. Pretty big number.
Chris, do you want to chime in?
Through you, Chair. Through this report, we're not actually approving any aspects of the budget. The 2025 budget figures shown there are estimates for comparison purposes. In the past, we've approved this report before final budget approval. So if there are amendments to either the operating budget, impacting transfers to reserves, debt servicing costs, or to capital, it wouldn't impact the ability to approve this report, and it would not require amendments.
Okay, I'm still not understanding from that answer why that's the case. Like if we're talking $248 million, like presumably those numbers change. And so, the motion that we're being asked to pass is that we adopt this report titled Municipal Budget Regulation. And so if it doesn't matter, then I would suggest we should be dealing with it after we actually pass the budget, not before. And then there's clarity.
Through the chair. So those numbers are for reference. That you're not in this report. You're not passing those numbers. They're estimates. The essence of this report is to recognize that we budget on a modified cash basis, and that some of these accruals that you see when we do the financial statements are not part of our budgeting framework. So it's just recognizing that that's per the regulation, that's how we've developed this budget.
I'm going to suggest that we defer this until after we vote on number 7 so that there's further clarity. Because I honestly am a little, I'll just say, not comfortable with it at the moment. I'll just leave it at that.
I do have a speakers list, so we'll carry down that list and we'll see where we go with it. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. Is this the way that was this the order in which the agenda was? Like, was this the agenda order last year, the year before that, the year before that, the year before that, the year before that? Okay, and the year before that. So I'm just curious if that's the way it always goes. I'm like, I note that it says December 11th on the report. Maybe you'd be people would be more comfortable if it says December 20th. Because that would catch, the changes that have been made this morning. But otherwise, I think if this is the way it's been done, sort of for people who've been around this horseshoes time much longer than me, I see no reason why we need to defer this.
Okay, Councillor Salonen.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I was just going to second procedurally moving this to after we pass the main budget motion.
Okay, so we have a deferral, I guess, right? Moved by Councillor Verbanovic, seconded by Councillor Salonen. So any discussion on the deferral, time and place discussion? Okay, so we'll vote on the deferral. Nope. Oh, Councillor Deutschman's got a time and place comment?
Yeah, so just on time and place, I don't think it's necessary to defer to a different time or place because it's how we've done it procedurally in the past. And Councillor Verbanovic's not really clear on why he has an issue. I don't understand the he hasn't given a reason why he wants it moved. When I look at the material, it says about adopting a budget including estimates of all sums. So this is an estimate. So
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, that's not proper, okay? You've called for a deferral. Can't argue it. Let's go on with the vote.
Okay. Again, my friend may assume it's improper, but I'm discussing time and place, and my friend keeps insisting it's not.
Well, what you're doing is you're expanding to do a huge argument.
No, I will not have my time run over by my friend on the other side because he may feel it's not appropriate.
All right, guys.
Perhaps he could request to speak and then speak when his time comes up.
And that would be good advice as well. So if there's no further discussion on the deferral, we're going to just go to a vote on it and then be done with it either way, I suppose. Councillor James. Okay, that's defeated. I think we've got a bit more clarification. Mr. Wilson, do you want to just chime in terms of the helping council understand the logistics of this and then the final budget motion?
Through you, Chair. As noted on page 1 of the report, under report highlights, the second bullet, as per the regulation, this needs to be adopted. So before adopting a budget that excludes any of the expenses noted in this report, a municipality must prepare a report regarding the excluded expenses and adopt it, report by resolution. So this does need to be approved before the final budget motion. And just as a historical reference, for the 2023 budget, we prepared this report 2 weeks prior to budget approval, and it was approved at that time. This report would not get updated to reflect any amendments that are made to the budget from what was presented in the preliminary budget through to the final budget.
Okay, so that being said, I see another further discussion. Do we have a mover and a seconder of that regulation moved by Councillor Deutschmann, seconded by Councillor Wolf? Any discussion on that? We'll go to a vote then, colleagues. Okay, colleagues, that is carried. So we'll move to number 7. Oh. Yep, Councillor James, prior to that. Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So I would like to, under the Municipal Act, item 239, move to go into a closed meeting regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees.
Seconded by Councillor Foxon. Any discussion or discussion on that? So we'll go to a vote now, colleagues. Oh, Chair Redmond.
So just to be clear, so we're going in to talk about an identifiable individual, and if we go into close, that will be the topic we're discussing. And I'm going to reiterate the comments I made earlier, that all colleagues need to realize that we're going in to talk about a specific motion, and that will be all we talk about when we come back out under the Municipal Act.
Okay. It can be under individuals or board,
okay.
Including municipal.
Colleagues, we'll go to a vote on that motion moved by Councillor James, seconded by Councillor Foxton. Okay, point of clarification.
Is your motion individual or individuals?
So my motion is regarding an identifiable individual, but that also can include multiple municipal employees as well. It's under section B. Okay. So personal matters, which it can include more than one.
Thank you for your clarification.
Okay, colleagues, that looks like it's heading to a favorable vote to go to close. So, okay, that's carried. We'll head down. Yeah, that's carried, colleagues. So we'll head downstairs. Okay, yeah, I'll let finance give me the nod if they're good to go on this. You let me know if you're. Okay, we'll do a motion to reconvene, colleagues. Moved by Councillor Foxon, seconded by Councillor James. All those in favor? Yeah. All right, that's carried. So colleagues, we're over at number 7, the main budget motion. I guess I'll ask at this point if there are any additional amendments with respect to the 2025 budget before we vote on the main budget motion as amended. Councillor Foxon.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. There was part of the budget now is that the staff do a further cut, and it's incorporated in the budget. I would like to move a motion that whatever staff does to get there, they have to provide a report back to council on where they took the cuts from.
Okay, a seconder. This is in relation to Councillor Vrbanovic's previous motion. So Councillor Craig seconded that. Is there any further discussion on that in terms of clarity, or Councillor James?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Foxton, for bringing this forward. This is one of the things that I was struggling with that vote, is that making kind of that, overarching cut and not having an understanding of the decision that we are, putting on staff to do. So I would absolutely support that. I think we need that in terms of, transparency, but also an accountability for us as well, and conscious of some of the things that staff had identified, like housing, our housing, I don't know, as Councillor Deutschman said, I don't know anybody who's been in there, but I have, and I know people who've been in there, and there is a significant amount of work that needs to be done within our buildings. So I support the motion and hope staff can come back and at least provide us with that for our own accountability. Thank you.
Okay, so we got some questions, but I understand the technical part of it is that we need to do still waive notice on this. So no, we'll just, I guess, pull a vote up to waive notice. We need to. Yes.
Sorry, I'm not trying to be difficult here, but I just, like, if there's a core motion on the table, it is regular practice, and any time that I've been, that people can move an amendment without needing to waive notice. Like, this is, like, if that's not what our procedural bylaw says, then I think clearly we need to do a major overhaul of our procedural bylaw.
This is only reacting to a motion that we passed ourselves, I believe, not too long ago, about limiting motions on actual budget day. I hear where you're going, Councillor Verbanovic. Councillor Salmon?
Well, I was just going to say, to Councillor Verbanovic's point, if we actually moved and seconded the budget motion before us, then could somebody not amend it? Like, don't we just need to get it on the floor and then someone could make an amendment? Because that technically wouldn't be a new motion. It would be an amendment to the motion.
Yeah, the main
floor.
one, correct.
And if that be the case, can I move the budget motion?
So if we quickly deal with this notice of motion one, we can just move on to the actual motion itself. I get, you make a valid point. We could have done it either way. I asked if there were any, because in case there was actual additional councillor driven motions that they wanted to bring up today, that process of waiving notion would have to follow. So, okay, so Salmon and James, okay, so we'll vote on waiving of the notice, and then we'll go back to the debate on the motion itself, and I'll have Councillor Deutschman speak next to it. So. Okay, that's carried, so we're going to deal with it now. Councillor Deutschman.
Yeah, thank you, Chairs. Could we see the motion written up on the board, and then I'll come back after? So, Councillor Foxton, that's a staff reports back, but there's nothing there that says subject to any approval by council. So it's just a report back as to what they're doing, period. There's no approval or anything like that. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Foxton, or sorry, Councillor Wolf. I know, we've got lots of animal, we have a lot of animal names around here.
The wolf is bigger. Through you, Mr. Chair.
I'm more afraid of a wolf too, so.
Should be. Anyway, with this motion, and we're already saying, you know, well, don't cut here or don't cut there. I'm wondering if we should say with approval. I was going to make a motion, an amendment, before it was called, that we just say, if people say they wanted staff to take a second look, but we're asking them not just to take a second look, we're asking them to take a second look and come back with an exact figure of money. And I think that's very restrictive. This, I think, if we say with approval, I think would help us really see where the money is coming and really was there 5% that could be taken out without hurting services, hurting the people we've said we all the way along not wanted to hurt. You know, when we know ourselves that we only cut as a council, I think it was 1.4 million, and because of the way we added things, I think we also would like to have some control over what gets taken out. So I wonder if we should say with approval, or I'm suggesting we should say with approval of council. So I don't know if that's something that would be approved, or I need an amendment to the amendment.
Okay, it's a question of the mover, so Councillor Foxton, if you want to answer that.
Yes, so what we're saying is that funds have to be removed, but they cannot touch what we've already passed in budget. So they have to find cuts elsewhere. So the bus routes that we approved in budget cannot be cut. The garbage pickup in the downtown cores can't be cut. Because it's already, we're passing the budget, but this is saying further cuts they have to find outside of the areas of the budget. Barry, do you know?
Well, I think that what was mentioned, like for instance, maintenance, right? Facility maintenance, and we heard what that was. We also heard with communications that people needed cell phones to get rid of our landlines, and but that's all on the chopping block right now. So we just heard from Councillor James, we don't want to cut maintenance to our housing stock because it needs it. So that's where I'm saying we maybe should say with council approval, and because we may not wish some of the cuts that are offered, and we may say, look someplace else, or we may say, okay, we realize that whatever the figure is, 6 million is too much, 5 million is going to do it. Well, that's adopting the budget. Like, we can finalize the budget. We can, after the budget, we as we know, we add things all year.
Yeah, we have. I'm gonna carry on down the speakers list. And then,
All right, so I guess should I ask, would that be with approval? Do I need another amendment, or was it approved by the mover and seconder?
Yeah, the motion that was moved by Councillor Foxon is up. Councillor Foxon, does that summarize what your intentions were? Okay, let's go through the speakers list.
Okay.
Because I don't have a seconder as of right now for, oh, sorry, Matthew, go ahead.
Sorry, just not trying to wordsmith too much, but would it be possible for you to rephrase the last part to say, instead of regarding the information on the reductions evaluated, to say providing information on the reductions to be executed? Because that's still it's not just an evaluation, now it's a decision, So if you would replace or regarding the information on the reductions to be executed.
Councillor McCabe.
So I think that the motion, the first part of the motion about reporting back on each item, it feels like we're restarting the budget process with this, right? I think we are really kind of, we boxed ourselves into a corner. It sounds like with the previous motion about saying that we want to, the council supported the cut 5% across facilities, different departments, but now we want to report on what they're going to cut, which is what we just went through since in November, October, and September. Those were the discussions we had. So either we make it and I actually think that we really, by voting for that, have abdicated our responsibility as a council, because those are decisions we're supposed to make. Staff already provided their recommendations to us. From whenever we started this process, August, September, October, November. So now asking for a report on the areas that they are going to make further reductions, I think is, yes, of course we want to know, but then we can't also say, well, now we want to know, but now we're going to second guess you and cut, and we don't agree with it. So I think we've kind of boxed ourselves into a corner by approving the previous motion around the 5% cuts to every department. That was something, in my view, that if council really wanted to do that, we should have had the motion like that in November or October and given that direction to staff. I think it's really unfair to bring this now at this late time and then say, and now we want to second guess what's the decisions that staff are going to make. I'm really disappointed that this is the place that we're at, and that these conversations didn't happen weeks and months ago. And I think it's really unfair, the place that we led ourselves to be.
Councillor Solomon.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I do just want to add some clarity, at least my interpretation of the motion that Council has now passed, regardless of how people independently feel about it. But it was stating that the areas of supplies, equipment, facility maintenance, professional fees and services, communications, travel, and facility occupancy charges will be capped at 5% in terms of an increase. So now what council has asked is for staff to go back and work within those means to do what they want within their departments. And then this amendment is asking for them just to notify us what they did and where they made those changes. So it may impact, in some cases, some of the facilities maintenance that we were talking about, but it's not saying we're removing facilities maintenance. That's still going to happen. It is just capped at 5% of an increase for this year. So I just want to clarify, nothing is actually being struck off the table. We aren't going back or asking staff to completely redo everything that they've done. We're simply saying the funds that we are able to allocate to those departments, council's decided is a 5% increase cap across the board. And then asking staff just to notify us what those changes and that cap looked like for their budgets, which can help inform future budgets for us and decision making. I think that we're really losing sight of that as we keep on going around. And I don't want people in the general public who are impacted by these services to think that we're scrapping these services completely, because that's not what's been done. The base level budget still has them, and then it's a 5% increase cap that has been placed, of which is in the jurisdiction of staff to work with the resources that they have been provided. So just want to add context there. I will be in favor of the amendment. I will not if it's added with the council approval, because then we wouldn't be passing the budget and we would be going around in circles again. The decision has been made. We're capping those departments at 5%. Council's decided that this morning, unless somebody goes to reopen that. So let's just move on and make this decision and get this information back from staff once they've done it.
Councillor Foxton. Oh, you were up, Councillor Foxton, next.
Ditto to what Councillor Salonen said.
Okay, Councillor Verbenovich.
Thanks very much. And maybe just, I'd like to try to hopefully add some clarity, because I think Councillor Salonen's comments did help in that regard. So to be clear, the overall average increase across those expense areas, across all departments, was 9.32%, representing $8,008,000. There was $1,070,000 that we had already reduced through the last day of budget discussions. So that left us with $6,938,000, which is what we earlier approved today. This motion is, and to be clear, in terms of that motion, it simply said that across all those areas, there's an overall decrease of that amount. So when staff take this away, they may come back and say, you know what, renovations in housing is not an area we can cut in, but perhaps, you know, switching to buy cell phones for everyone and so on is something that's going to have to wait a year. And so they'll do a bigger decrease there. That overall list across all of those expense areas is what staff will need to come at a total amount or a total decrease of $6,938,000. I do think it is not unreasonable for us to say we want to see that list, both staff's recommendations and any other options, and ratify that. That doesn't stop us from approving that portion of the budget today, if that's the will of council. It simply says that's the amount, but the actual list is what we want to see come back for council, either as information or for council to ratify and make changes. The last point that I'll make, Mr. Chair, is, you know, while I wholeheartedly support this motion and would in fact support it with an ultimate ratification of council, in addition to the information piece, but I do, as I said earlier today, still believe, and at the appropriate time, think that there is more work to be done. As much as, and as frustrating as it may be, I do think there is more work to be done to get this budget to a lower amount. And we'll be moving a deferral on the overall budget so that we can send it back to have that happen. I recognize that will likely fail, but I feel very strongly about that, and at the appropriate time, we'll be moving that motion.
Okay, well, so we do have the motion on the table, and I think it's appropriate to come back to you, Councillor Verbanovic, on that. Let's carry on with the speakers list. I know we've already, through Councillor Verbanovic's motion, somewhat debated the same content once, but I'll go to the speakers list on this particular motion if you want. Remove you. Chair Redmond.
I see this motion as asking for an implementation to come back from staff, and I think that would happen as pro forma in any budget, so I don't have a problem with this. I would just like to echo comments that previously were made by both Councillors Wolf and Salonen, and that's, let's remember today, let's remember the hard discussions we've been having since August. So in January and February, when very compelling stories come forward, we do not start undoing all this difficult work, which we did last year.
Councillor Shantz?
Thank you, and sorry for having to slip out. I think I've managed to. I just want to make sure that my understanding is clear, because I understand the request is that with the capping is across all departments. So I've heard people say it's going to affect a cut in a department, and in my mind, we're not saying that each department has to cut 5% on those lines. I believe that what the intent was that overall, between all the departments, a 5% reduction. So anyway, if I'm wrong on that understanding, someone please correct me.
No. I know, colleagues, we're on our last one. We may have another one coming up, but I know there are some folks that need to leave by noon, but it's 11:10 now. So Councillor Craig, and I don't know if there was any staff comment to Councillor Shantz's question at all, but I think you've got it understanding, right, Councillor Shantz? So Councillor Craig.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I certainly, I'm going to support the motion from the point of view that members of staff, Mr. Gates, all members of staff understand the sensitivities of council with regards to various issues here. And I would expect that when they come back, they will in fact move items around in terms of support for the very vulnerable things that we have mentioned today. And if there's a failure, I'm going to blame the regional chair. I'm going to blame the chair in the committee here. Okay, it's your fault, because you'll be overseeing it, right? Let's be honest here. Come on, folks.
Councillor, notice.
Thank you, Chair. I wish the item, excuse me, 4.1 would have been brought to us a couple months ago, so that that staff could have had a chance to respond, and we would be making a decision on some realities of what might happen to the services that we provide and the people we provide these services to. And so I'm going to support the motion, but I really do think we should have had this information sooner so we can make a better and more informed decision.
Point of privilege.
Councillor Deutschman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Harris. Yeah, so just to clarify, no one is saying that a department's getting cut or anything like that. It's a reduction in services that is happening. And basically what council has done is council has abdicated its role to staff to make cuts, because they're just going to come back to us with cuts of $6.9 million, and we're not approving that. It's done. Whatever they decide to do, that is what's going to happen, because now we've just baked that into the budget. So council has abdicated its role with respect to this step, and that's what's occurring right now. And that's exactly what has happened. Unless my friend is suggesting that we're going to approve, so when it comes back with these cuts, and then what are we doing? Are we reducing then the cuts that are happening and then reducing that 1%, that 6.9 million? We've left ourselves in a precarious situation where we left it to staff, not the elected representatives of the people of the region of Waterloo, to make the decision on that 6.9 million.
Okay, Councillor Urbanovic, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you. Just, I guess, a couple points. Number one, the initial motion has been passed. There's an amendment on the floor with potentially some additional wording that's saying that amount has been cut, but we want to see a report come back and council potentially to actually be able to ratify that report. So the amount is cut, that report would come back. It's across all of those expense areas. Staff can bring forward recommendations. I think it was Councillor Craig who made the comment that staff are well aware of what the sensitivities around this horseshoe are around certain areas, and will presumably consider those in terms of, when they consider, well, like what's more important, facilities maintenance or communication? So what's more important, facilities maintenance or travel? And consider that in making their recommendations. I think, respectfully, this suggestion that somehow this motion could have been brought 2 months ago, we didn't have all the information that we have now 2 months ago. It is true, Councillor McCabe, and so please don't be, suggesting that that's not the case. Thank you.
Okay. So I think we're at the point where we're going to vote now on the motion of Councillor Foxon, seconded by Councillor Sell. No, there's no, it's an amendment to the amendment. No. We need a second. Okay, so now we've got the amendment now we're asking for an amendment from Councillor Wolf. Seconded by? Okay. Councillor Vanovic, okay. So we'll pop that amendment up and we'll vote on the amendment. We're voting on the amendment. Councillor James. Yeah. Okay, so that's carried. We'll go to the original motion as amended, and we'll vote on that. Colleagues? Yeah, that staff report back each item regarding item 4.1 regarding the information on the reductions to be executed for council approval. That is the now amended motion we are voting on.
I know I'm the only one who hasn't voted, but may I ask a point of clarification, because it might be worthwhile for the rest of my colleagues to know. I know that we've paused the vote before or redone votes before.
We're in the middle.
I know, we've done it in the middle of a vote. What my question is if this is defeated, does that mean, because Chair Redmond, I agree with what she said, it's not irregular for staff to report back on budgets, essentially how they've gone and performed. So I just want to make sure that if this is defeated, we aren't preventing ourselves from getting that information
Well,
from staff in the future.
it's 14 of the people are in favor of it already, so I
Okay,
mean,
well, that's fine then.
it's very unlikely that it's unlikely that your ballot
Well,
will.
it would help if we just had to raise our hands to vote, but that's
I
fine.
know. But we had that but then council asked for the motion for every vote to be recorded, right? So, if only your one vote counted 14 times, we would have had that scenario, but we don't. Okay, so now we're on to the main budget motion. But actually, there was a deferral by. Okay. Yep. She spoke earlier. Oh, okay. Councillor Shantz, do you want to indicate your vote verbally so we can record that? No, it was 14.
Sorry, I'm a little confused what we're voting on. I think my vote came up late. Anyway.
Okay.
Are we voting on the
vote? Okay, we've got you, Councillor Shantz. Okay, so now we're ranking. We're now on item 7, the main budget motion approval. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder. Councillor James, Councillor Foxon, discussion. Councillor Verbanovic.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And so, as I indicated earlier, I will be moving a deferral to this to the first council day in January. I believe that, we're at a point that's still far too high in terms of an overall increase. I think we need to direct staff to come back with additional proposed property tax increase impacts that will see us come in at a level no higher than 6%, and ideally I would like to see it closer to 5% personally. And I think that we collectively need to send this back to staff with that assignment and have that come back to us in January. I will remind, from a timing perspective, and I'll save my comments on the budget overall until later, but from a timing perspective, there are many times when we see our budget go into January, not the least of which is in an election year. And as such, I would think that we owe it to our residents, particularly when we're seeing an increase of this caliber, to do everything in our power collectively, both as administration and as council, to get it as low as possible. As I said earlier, don't expect that. I would hope that we can pass this, but I also, judging by the comments made previously, recognize that it may not. But I feel strongly enough that I feel I need to make this recommendation.
Okay,
thank you.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Salonen is seconding it. Speakers list, Chair Redmond.
Sorry, was that seconded or was Councillor Salonen fixing her hair?
Although I do both, it was seconded. I
Thank
do
you.
believe, like Councillor Craig, allowing everyone to have their motion on the floor.
Yeah, okay.
I will not be supporting the deferral, and I really do appreciate the attention that Councillor Verbanovic has given in bringing forward these notices of motion. However, I can recall that Councillor Craig brought in a motion months ago about an 8% increase. So I would suggest that this entire proposition could have been debated with different parameters. So many of us who were on the subcommittee have been through this and have had the benefit of additional detail. Staff have been working really hard to bring forward the kind of budget that we indicated we felt we could support. So I will not support this deferral. I think there's been lots of discussion, and we have all, I think, kept an eye on the stress that individual residents are dealing with and the realities that there is inflation, and that impacts our budget and our ability to keep our tax rate as low as possible. So I will not support the deferral.
Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I too will not support the deferral. I think we've asked staff to already go back, find over $6 million. I think once they do that, I think the well has run dry. I also would like to know from staff, if we don't pass the budget today, what repercussions that could have.
I'll let Matthew, do you want to speak to that?
Through the chair, so there are a number of expenditures in the budget that are planned to start on January 1st. So that would not be able, we would not be able to execute that, especially if there's service expansions. I know Peter's just in the back there, so I know some of the Plantain chronic homelessness expansions include expenditures for expanded warming centers, for example, that we would want to start January 1st, and that require the expansion to be approved and in the approved budget.
Okay, we can go around the horn, or we can vote on your intentions, or you can verbally tell us, both end up in the same result. So I'll continue down the list, try to keep things moving.
Place and time.
Pardon me?
Place and time, because it's on for.
Yeah. Councillor James.
So I'll hold.
Councillor Foxon.
What are we discussing? Is there a deferral?
Well, we now have a deferral, and so we're trying to move the speakers list that have comments.
I will not speak on the deferral. I'll wait for the.
Okay, Councillor McCabe? Yeah, all right, so we're going to put the question up for us to vote on, colleagues. The deferral vote will now take place. You see the motion in front of you. Thank you. Okay, that is defeated. We'll go back to the original motion, but we do need finance to chime in on that prior to that vote happening. So, Matthew, go ahead, because I think there's some information I think council should be aware of based on the previous 4-1. So go ahead.
Through you, Chair. So then I'll pass it to finance to give the final numbers, but just for during closed session, finance have been working on evaluating the tax levy impact of the motion that council just approved relative to facilities, equipment, supplies, etc. So just for clarity, so we know our gross, the portion of our gross expenditure that actually ends up on the tax levy is about 38%. The rest of our expenditure is covered by revenues from third parties, other levels of government in particular. Some of it goes on the tax rates. So, which means that the impact of the motion that you approved, so you approved a capping of expenditures and a reduction of $6.9 million in expenditure on facilities, et cetera. 38% of that on average, again, this is a blanket motion, 38% of that will impact the tax levy, and the rest will go on revenue or rates. So the impact that you will see in the updated financial table is a net reduction on the tax levy of $2.64 million. I hope that's been, I hope that's clear. It's just trying to explain what the step between this morning's budget and what the table that will be presented to you now.
All right, so with that being said, did you have a number, Chris, for us by chance?
Through you, Chair, with a levy reduction of $2.642 million, the overall impact on the region's portion of the tax bill is now 9.89%. When factoring in a police increase of 8.56%, we're at an overall tax levy impact of 9.48%.
Okay, I've got a speakers list. I'll go through it. Councillor James.
Okay, so that is the final, it's 9.48 is what we are at now. This is still higher than I anticipated. I'm happy that it's under double digits. This is tough. And what I'm thinking about right now with this budget and for council colleagues is to remember those people who came in and spoke to us for the past public input sessions, the steering committee for doing the work ahead of time. This has been a long, brutal process. I'm going to queue out for a second because I'm still processing this, but I'll queue back in after.
Okay, Councillor Foxon.
Thank you, Chair. So that includes the reduction due to the motion by Councillor Ivanovic? So we were at 10 before? I thought we started this and we were at 9. And if we're going down 1%, why are we not at 8?
So through the chair, so there's several factors. Once the final number that Chris just mentioned is combined with the police budget. So when you add the two, our influence is only on the regional section, which is about, 2/3 of the budget. And then what I was saying about the reductions is that when you reduce $3 in expenditure, only $1 is actually on the tax levy. So 38%. So with Councillor Verbenovic's motion of a reduction of nearly 7 million, the impact on the tax levy is about 38. The overall impact on tax levy is 38%. So the reduction on the tax levy is 38% of 7 million, which is $2.6 million. So that's the part that we saved on the regional portion of the budget. So all in all combined, these things end up being, basically bringing down by, we get to about 0.5% in the end, the combined region and police budget with that reduction.
Okay, so I thought we were at the 9% that we started with, 9 point whatever, was including the police.
Through you, Chair, the regions component, we started the day at 10.39%. Based on the amendment, the region share is now at 9.89%. The police component is unchanged at 8.56. So overall, we started the day with a combined property tax levy impact of 9.83, which has been revised down to 9.48 overall.
Thank you.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. Can you remind me, because I did want to know that number, so thank you. That was my original question. Has this motion been moved? Yes. Okay. Fine. And seconded. Okay, I really just wanted to hear where we're at. And sorry. And I guess I would just say, let's not pretend that we didn't have the information that we need well in advance, because this budget, the information we needed was in the budget we got in October.
Councillor Vernick, were you in the queue? I did see your name there at one point. Okay, you were next, and then Councillor Deutschman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, the intent of that reduction, which I'm sure everyone was aware of, was to actually reduce the tax levy. And so my anticipation would have been that $6.9 million reduction would have reduced the tax levy by approximately 1.3%. It's not my view, nor my interpretation, but that's not my decision to make, that it's 6.9% less, provincial and other monies that are replaced through different things, and therefore it's only, the amount that's being contemplated. Notwithstanding all that, Mr. Chair, and despite efforts to make additional adjustments, which included a capital item that was deferred, which had hoped to actually send this back for additional work to be done. The reality is, in my view, there was all sorts of talk about abdication. I think if we're actually bringing forward a budget of this increase at a fiscally difficult time for so many people, when regardless of what your politics are, we're seeing federal and provincial governments recognizing that people are hurting and we need to make some, we need to help them here. A cut or an increase that's almost double digit, in my view, is abdicating our collective responsibility. And it makes me sad, therefore, that for the second time in what I think now is 40 budgets that I've been part of, regionally and municipally, that sadly, for the second time, I'm going to have to be voting against this budget. There are some good things in this budget without question. But the reality is, this budget is going to make more people homeless. This budget is going to make life more difficult for people in this region, and I can't support it in its present form. In a few short days, we're going to see Santa Claus coming to this region, and we're going to see people celebrating the holidays. The last thing that I think anybody wants in their gift package is a lump of coal, and that's what I feel this budget is going to be. So I will be voting against it.
Okay, Councillor Deutschman.
I might defer to polish up some lines so that I could have a few things to say. I'm really surprised by those comments from Councillor Verbanovich. I mean, we as a council approved going back to staff. We actually created a subcommittee of finance, and 8% was the number. That was Councillor Craig's motion. It was 8%. I don't recall anyone talking about lumps of coal or more people homeless or anything like that if we were going to use 8% as the number back then. And that was the responsible time of governance to go back and say, no, 8's not the number, it should be 5. And I would expect experienced people in municipal politics to understand the process it takes to produce a budget and to make those decisions well in advance. And at the time we said 8% was the number. Now, I'm a little concerned about this issue about what 6.9 actually is, and I'll agree with Councillor Verbanovich on that issue. I just assumed that if we're knocking 6.9 off, because we've been using 5.9 or whatever, for every 5.9 it was 1%, how 6.9 suddenly is not 1% anymore. So that I have a concern about. But I'll not accept someone saying we're going to make more people homeless. We're helping a lot of people. This region works hard to deal with the homeless population. We're doing everything we can. And as a responsible council, we said 8%, and we're just above 8%. So we've done a good job with this budget, and we have taken the steps that are required in order to responsibly put forward a budget dealing with the issues that we deal with. And I hear comments about the provincial and federal government. We spend almost $200 million on provincial initiatives with the local levy. I don't want to hear about the provincial government doing their job. The provincial government is failing municipalities right now. It's failing municipalities. It's failing on the homelessness. It's failing on those that are drug addicted because they're abdicating their role of assisting us in ensuring we have sufficient funding to deal with the issues. And so if our budget has to be higher, it's because we have to step in, unfortunately, through the property tax base with our own views, wherever we come from the political spectrum, and decide who we want to help and how we're going to help them. And this budget is a reflection of that. And my friend wants to talk about working hard. I refer back to that police budget. And there was not working hard with respect to certain items in that police budget. And so now I'm hearing a different comment about that on our staff. And that's the issue. And this is my time. And I will finish during my time. And my friends can pop on and have their say, and I'll not interrupt them because I respect the process. So when I hear people talking about not working hard, I don't accept that. This staff has worked very hard over a long period of time with the direction of council. So how I'm going to vote on the budget, though, that's a whole different thing. But some of those comments that I've heard today, as a member of council being accused of now putting more people homeless, I don't accept that for a moment. We've been working hard throughout this whole process, and I reject those comments completely. Thank you.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I'm just going to tag on to the tail end of Councillor Deutschman's comments and say that we have been at this for months and months. And I know there was thought of deferral and that has failed, but how would we expect staff to come back in 6 weeks with the kind of changes that we've now challenged them with implementing? It's a complex process, and I guess I have a couple of questions that I would maybe clarify the movement that we've made in the budget today. And I would agree that we asked for 8%, and this is a bit higher, but when we compare to other jurisdictions, we need to look at the increases that they've had historically, the growth rate that they're dealing with as regional governments and service managers, and the challenges that they have with housing, affordability, homelessness, and the kind of services that we know that people who are living on the margins depend on. And I think we have historically, the current council and the past council, tried to deal with that with humanity. And it's a fine balance. I would like to know, through the service reductions and the changes that we've made, how much actual money we've taken out of expenditure, and how many grants and other sources of revenue that we may have foregone. And so lost revenue and saving in expenditure. Again, I would reiterate that we're the fastest growing metropolitan census area, and I don't believe that staff could come back in 6 weeks. So while this feels like a lot of heavy lifting, I do acknowledge that we have maintained some of the services that we heard from the community. And again, I want to reiterate, there was a much longer list that we dealt with in camera around service reductions, and the service reductions that we felt needed to go to the community for input were brought out in open session. And we haven't approved all of those service reductions, but we considered it because we know what a difficult year this is. So I'd like to know the amount currently on an average household, and the past, both the revenue and the expenditure that have been reduced today.
Go ahead, Chris, if you have it.
Through you, Chair, I can provide you with the current impact per average household. I don't have the other numbers readily available. Based on a 9.48% overall change in property taxes, including the region and police, the impact to the average homeowner would be $241 on an annual basis.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. I agree that, staff has done a lot of heavy lifting, and so have we on council. And it's, we've been at it for months. Staff has been at it longer. I'm not in favor of creating a moving target. I think what we've done today is good work and difficult work. And I'm not prepared to come back at the end of January and create another target. So I'm opposed to that part of it. But I do have a question in this, and that is, if I could just understand how you got the 38% of reductions is the amount of the tax levy. Is that just overall in the budget, where you sort of took the total amount of the budget and the total amount that came from levy and the total amount that came from other places? Or was that specific to the however many 7 areas that are being contemplated for reductions in the motion?
Through you, Chair. So that's a global number. So we just tried to get the fastest possible best response that we could give at this time. Illustrations again of what I can give, maybe a few examples just for clarity. In the supplies numbers that we talked about, some of them are medical supplies for paramedics. So these are fully covered, for example, by the Ministry of Health. So if I do a blanket reduction, this reduces the revenue. So there the main impact is actually on revenue. It's not really an impact on the tax levy. I'll give another example. I mean, we have water supplies in there. So these, if we reduce the water supplies, that will impact the user rates and not the tax levy. So we have, so you'll see that in, you know, in that table of all facilities, communication, same with communications, you know, communications, the cell phones for paramedics, that would be another expenditure that would be covered under, you know, under the Ministry of Health. So, you know, so some of the expenditures there are covered by external revenue. Some are internal transfers. I know we talked about, there's a bit of double counting in that table because the facilities maintenance is the actual expenditure, and then there's a facilities operations line, which is actually an accounting mechanism by which we allocate facilities costs to different departments. So when we reduce facilities, so I mean, maybe I'll stop there with some, I try to give some examples of why there's not a one-to-one relationship between the level of expenditures and the savings that we get on the tax levy. But the number, to respond specifically to your question, the 38%, that was the global number. That's the best, you know, quick estimate that we can do on the within 15 minutes based on what we're aware of. Thanks.
No, if I could just follow up with that, I've got a different understanding of the process that was being requested. And I would say that if it's items that are being covered by other levels of government, then that wouldn't be part of the discussion on the reduction. And as I said before, I wouldn't expect that the 5% would be across the board, but it would be, you know, maybe there's nothing in supplies for one of the departments, and maybe there's more in supplies in another department. So that. Excuse me, that's my interpretation of what I voted on.
Okay. Councillor Wolf. Oh, sorry, Mathieu. Can I answer?
No, just through each other very briefly, and you know, that's the work that lies ahead of us based on that motion, and that we'll bring back for information. And evidently, for example, you know, when as a leadership team we'll look at the reductions, we're not going to prioritize the reductions which just make us lose revenue, for sure. So we'll look at those that have the greatest impact. But today I can't, you know, we cannot give you a better estimate than what's been provided at this time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and so in the end it could be more, it could be less. I get that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wolf.
Through Mr. Chair, I agree that we worked very hard on this budget. We've worked for months, and I think it's very important that we pass this today. There are different things I wish we had in the budget, a lot of the heritage things, for instance. However, I am pleased with many of the things that we have. For instance, the increase to the food bank, our support of shelters, all of these things, transportation, all of these different aspects of the budget are important for us to pass by the January 1st. I know from my experience as a city councillor, if you are the last to get your tenders out because you've passed your budget in March, you're out of luck many times. So the earlier you get your tenders out, the better choice you have of bidders, construction companies, et cetera. But most importantly to me is the fact that our social services would be impacted greatly. And we know that the money for the food bank, et cetera, they need January 1st. They don't need us to wait 6 weeks to look for further cuts. And frankly, I don't see where we really can make further cuts. I think we've looked carefully. We're asking staff already to make cuts of over $6 million in this budget, after we've already made several $million cuts. So I think it's not perfect. Everyone would like it to be less, but I think it's what we need. So I will be voting in favor.
Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. With regards to the budget itself, I happen to agree along the line with Councillor Verbanovic in terms of where he's going and what he has been suggesting. He's talked about 40 budgets. I'm in the similar kind of category of number of budgets over a long period of time and know fully well that you can, in fact, extend this out, look for further cuts. Councillor Deutschmann is quite correct that a lot of our problems, if not the main body of the problems, is the fact of the province not coming to the table and supporting the people of the region of Waterloo with regards to budgetary items, sustainable funding. Now, I brought this up, council supported it. We need a new deal. We're not hearing from them. We've also had a meeting with our MPs and MPPs. We don't get any further response from them. So it's a period of frustration. Where Councillor Deutschmann falls down, if I may suggest, is the fact that once again he goes into the police budget. And again, repeatedly, police have come back, the accounting system has come back, and unfortunately has proven him incorrect, as he is this time. If we want to get into different quotes from different time periods, reminds me of Dickens' best of times and the worst of times, and that's exactly what we're in, the worst of times. And it's unfortunate, although the NDP has suddenly declared it won't support the government in a no confidence motion. But I'm going to bring up one last thing that makes it reluctant for me to support the motion, and that is the fact, and I have brought this up on a few occasions, about people from Cambridge and townships not coming out to help define the budget. It's a third of our region. And when I bring that up, nobody says anything. Everybody thinks, well, okay, but it's not okay. We need to start reaching out beyond Kitchener-Waterloo to the townships and particularly the city of Cambridge to get them involved. And that's where I stand on this particular issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Urbanovic.
Thanks very much. I guess the only one last point I would make for folks to consider is our overall tax increase based on the 9.48 that's being referenced for today over this term of council. 8.55 in our first budget, 6.95 in our second budget, and 9.48 in today's budget if it passes, for a grand total of 24.98%. And I think we just need to ask ourselves, is this something that we're comfortable with?
Councillor James.
Thank you. Thanks for coming back to me again. Had some time to process. So I understand that that this budget is higher. It's higher than I would have expected it to be. But I also recognize that we are covering a lot of things that we shouldn't be. And my question, I guess, for staff, and I don't know if this is Commissioner Steffler or Chris, do you have a number of the things that we are covering in the budget that we shouldn't be, that are responsibilities of other levels of government? If we remove that, what would our number look like? Do you have anything like that? An estimate?
So through you, Chair, I was looking to see if when's the last time we provided that to Budget Committee. I found a reference on October 16th, but that only referred to the 2024 approved budget. And I'm not sure if we updated it to reflect the 2025 preliminary budget. And certainly there have been some changes over the past couple of weeks. But based on the 2024 approved budget, the region provides $188 million in reserve and levy funding for those programs that are being referenced. And we could certainly look to update that figure once 25.
It would be good. So, I mean, and using kind of that 5.3, what percentage would that look like in a reduction of our budget if we were to apply that model to today?
Well, $188 million is a significant component of our levy. Our total levy that we're looking at right now is $580 million approximately.
I mean, I'm putting you on the spot, but I think there's a message that is clearly, evident for everyone. And as Councillor Craig has said, Councillor Deutschmann has said, we're covering a lot of things that we shouldn't be covering or that we need help for, and recognizing the the calls and the emails and all of the advocacy we're doing and the need for a new deal for municipalities. I think the numbers are going up because the math is not working, and I consider us the frontline staff when it comes to an organization. And again, directly related to communities, we are the ones who are putting this on the community, and really we're seeing this in this number today. I know that there have been decisions that we've made that impact community. I'm conscious of those individuals who came and spoke to us, the vulnerable in the community who spoke to us not too long ago about the impact some of these reductions would take and have, the impacts of service reductions and the advocacy where people came out to speak about the need. I mean, there are significant changes that are happening in services that are required. We know what our pit count is right now. We know there is work to be done, and there are, dedicated people and staff and community individuals that want to get to work to try and help. So I think, I will be supporting this budget, and I recognize that this number is higher. But again, based on what we've heard from staff, we know that we're covering a brunt of things that we shouldn't be. And, have we had a new deal? Or, thought in the work that's being done here and representation of upper levels of government, we, our taxpayers and those in the community would, they wouldn't be feeling the brunt of this so much. So, I will support this budget. It's a reluctant supporting of it, but I think there's a clear message when it comes to future years around the budgeting process in the region and municipalities.
Okay, we'll keep her moving along, please, folks. Councillor Foxon.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. And I'm not saying that anybody on this table hasn't worked really hard at this, staff, anyone. I would like councillors, and I don't mean to be attacking anyone, but I would like councillors to speak as if they were at that podium speaking. And we have a disclaimer that we use at the beginning of each thing, saying if you do not talk with dignity, with respect, with treating, then you will be at. I want that same decorum around this table because I don't feel it exists today. So that's what I'm asking for, and that's when sometimes when I interrupt, when I feel that others are being attacked. Thank you.
It's a good reminder for us all. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. So, I mean, there's a lot of things have been said. Some that I agree with, some that I don't, and some characterizations of council that I agree with, and some that I don't. But I think, I hope and believe that we all come to the table with the best interests of all our residents in mind. I think, particularly this is, I really struggle with whether to approve this budget or not, because I certainly don't support I feel what is randomly being applied for the 5% reductions in different departments. I think that's very random, and I think that's doing so at such a late state is not fair to the community because they don't know what that's going to look like and what that impact might be. I don't think it's fair to staff, and I don't think it's fair to council to have brought that in at such a late date. We got the budget and we got the information that we needed in a very timely manner. Yes, it was a big budget. It's a big budget. There's big services that people count on in our community. But we got that in September or October. So there certainly was enough time in the past number of months and weeks, I think, to do the work that we needed to do. And so I really struggle with the lateness of having a motion like what was just passed put before us. Having said that, within the budget, I'm really pleased based on the community response that we had, particularly that we continued, we did reduce, but that we did continue to support transit in particular, because because that's a critical service, I think, for, I mean, pick a sector, pick a community, pick an area of our region. I think that's, you know, there's real demands there, and it's a real virtuous circle, particularly for transit. The more you invest in it, the more it's going to be used. The more it's going to be used, the more we're going to continue to invest in it, and it really is a way that adds a significant amount of affordability and affordable options to residents across our region. You know, I mean, if you don't have to purchase a second or a first or a third car, that's a massive savings and a huge affordability way to address affordability for people, whatever their income level is. So I am pleased that we, although we reduced in some areas, that we did keep a lot in there. So. Yeah, this is a struggle because, you know, 8%, 9%, 5%, you know, no one's ever going to be happy with the property tax levy that we levy, and part of that is because we're the only level of government where people know exactly how much they're paying, right? You can't itemize to the dollar amount how much people are paying provincially and how much people are paying federally, right? So we're such an open book that we're very transparent, and people can see that every time they get their bill from us. And we know that these are real challenges for people in the community, and I certainly don't like the characterization that we're not very much concerned about that, because I think it's top of mind for everyone across this community. And I think staff, I think that's clear of staff too, but I go back to Councillor James's point that the $188 million that the region is paying, that the region is contributing to services and programs that our residents rely on, that should be funded by other orders of government. That is a massive number in our budget, and that really is the problem. And we need, particularly the province, to come to the table and negotiate a new deal. We also need the federal government there, but to negotiate a new funding arrangement with municipalities, because 188 million, if I'm doing the 5.5, divide that by 5.5, that's, okay, I'm getting an getting it out from finance. That's nearly 34% of our budget. Like 34%. If that number, even if we got, you know, half of that or 10% of that, that has a massive positive impact on our budget and our property tax. So I think that's really where the work needs to be done. And I hope that the province and the feds are paying attention to municipalities like ours across the province to address that significant issue. Thank you.
Okay, it was just, you had, yeah. Okay. Councillor Erb, and then I have Chair Rubin, and we're gonna put this to a vote, colleagues. Okay, so Councillor Erb.
Well, Councillor Shantz has had her hand up for a while. I pressed back.
I consider that a legacy hand. Councillor Shantz, you still? Did you need to speak, Councillor Shantz?
Yes, I should be using the eScribe. Sorry, when I'm on Zoom, I always go to the Zoom hand. Yeah. I apologize. Do you want me to go on the Zoom?
Okay, we put you in the queue, so Councillor Erb, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's my colleagues have said it all in support and non-support. I'm going to support this budget. It's a number higher than all of us want. However, I think staff have worked as hard as we can expect them to work to bring in what services the community is asking for. We had a significant response from the community asking for certain services to be maintained, and council responded to that and put them back in, which is part of the reason the budget is where it's at. And so I'm not sure what more staff could do if we deferred this and asked them to bring it back. And so I'm prepared to reluctantly support it as well.
Okay, I'm going to ask Councillor Shantz to go, and we'll finish with Chair Redmond.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a couple of comments very similar to what Councillor McCabe made, and I know you're asking us not to do that, but I do want to point out that 34%, whatever it is a third of our budget. That's not a third of the increase. That's a third of the budget. And so if we had that money back from those levels of government, we could considerably reduce our taxes. And, you know, a number of years ago, council started down this road because we saw the needs in the community and we felt it was the right thing to do because we cared about the community. So regardless of how you vote, regardless of how you interpret everything that's gone on, council does care. We care a lot. We care a third of the budget. And, you know, I don't think we can do this, but I would be willing to put the budget on hold forever if I thought it would mean that other levels of government would come and fill in some of those blanks. But if anybody else around the table is more politically savvy than I am and thinks that that's a doable thing, I'd be right there with you. Thanks.
All right, Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I will be really quick because I recognize the time and we still have a council meeting. Just to say, please don't conflate a process that you may think is somewhat flawed or has taken a circuitous route with the end result, which is that we want to be a caring, compassionate community, and we're all in a violent agreement that senior levels of government need to be funding a lot higher the services that we provide, and everybody around this horseshoe is doing and saying what they believe is in the best interest of our constituents. So let's keep that in mind. Everybody wants the best result.
Okay, colleagues, we're going to put up the vote on that main budget motion for approval. So I know that it's already up, and I'll ask you to head over to eScribe to cast your vote. Just Councillor Shantz, if you want to toss your vote in there. Okay, colleagues, that's carried. Congratulations. Communications, there were written submissions received for information. You'll see them there in your package. We will now start a vote to adjourn the strategic planning and budget meeting, after which we'll take a brief break before starting a special council meeting. Is there a mover and a seconder? Councillor Foxton, seconded by Councillor Salonen. Please vote. Okay, that's carried, colleagues. I just had a brief recess.